The Columbus Day storm was one of the most frightening experiences of my life.
There were sheets of plywood, there were sheets of tin flying through the air. It was really frightening.
That was the longest repair job I ever was involved in. And some of those ice storms were horrendous, but not like that.
October 12th, 1962, late on a Friday afternoon, the most intense storm to ever hit this area. Winds up to 145 miles per hour roared north up Oregon's Willamette Valley. They knocked out power to 98% of PGE's 268,000 customers. It took 2 weeks, 330 PGE linemen, and 500 from other states to get the whole system back up. And no one knew it was coming.
I wasn't paying much attention, but somebody looked out the office window and said, "My gosh, it's turning black outside." And so pretty everybody come running either in the tool room or wherever there was a window looking to the west and said, "Oh my golly, I don't know what's coming, but something's coming, let's get out of here."
That afternoon, we had no warning. Things were just blowing all over and the wind was whipping. And it was unbelievable. It looked like a war zone.
They called us and said there was something on a pole that they needed off of there to get this pole, to get the transmission line back on. It was a carport sitting on top of the pole.
I had joined Channel 2 just 5 days before that storm hit. And so it really caught me by surprise because I was just trying to get settled into a brand new job. I just moved over from radio across town. And suddenly here comes this terrific torrent of darkness, if you will. And it was scary as it could be, but saw this lone policeman standing out there on the corner, and he was braced against the wind. And there were all of the windows on the corner of Meyer and Frank's blown out. Glass everywhere, flying everywhere. And I think the policeman probably had to duck some of that shard glass and that sort of thing.
I walked out of the electric building. I looked down the street just in time to see the corner windows of the Meyer and Frank building clatter.
And one of the scenes that is always seen too was taken by Hal Lesser of KPTV. Apparently he was looking out the window at the storm and saw the beginning of the roof going off of the stadium.
At that time, I was working for Wilhelm Trucking, and I got a call about 2:30 in the morning from Frank Drake of Drake Construction. Frank, incidentally, was on PGE's board, but also at the same time, he's president of the Multnomah Club, who at that time owned the stadium. And he said, "Ludi, get as many trucks and guys down to the floor of the stadium as you can immediately. We got to clean all the debris off the field so you can play football."
And the game itself went on the day after the storm.
Well, it was quite a storm. It took part of the roof off of my house. There was a chicken farmer up there on the mountain, and it blew him and his chickens clean over into Hillsborough territory, but that is, blew the chickens over there, chicken houses and everything.
Most of the time, about all you saw was trees down, not so much poles. The poles stood up pretty good, but the trees just took everything down with them. I guess you'd call it overwhelming. You'd look at it and you'd say, well, where do we start? Because sometimes there just wasn't any place to start. It was just a tangled up mess.
It was already dark, pitch black, and pouring rain. I got down there and the line, as far as I could see in the dark with spotlight and stuff, was all down laying in the highway. It just blew the pole, broke the poles right off.
Oregon City PG office in Warner Milne at that time, and it still is. Driving on Warner Milne, there's highline poles there, tall ones, and I was zooming in between the poles because they were blowing so hard and waving like they were going to break off, but lucky enough they never did.
The trees were down, the lines were down, it was dark, and to this day I wonder how I made it because I couldn't see anything. But I made it home, And then the next day was Saturday. Our manager called us back, and from Saturday on, we worked 10 and 14-hour shifts each day answering phones, because we didn't have a phone center, but everyone in PGE was on the phones trying to help our customers.
Well, I was reading meters, so they had us just doing gopher stuff. Well, the first thing I did was went into Portland and met some crews that were from out of state and led them out to Hillsboro so they could go to work. We couldn't do any line work, but we had a truck and we could drive around and say, okay, work here and work over there. And so that's how they used us, if you will, during that time.
I think we worked 24 hours probably the first couple of days, and then we went on to 18-hour shifts.
We worked for 18 days, 18 hours a day. But I was one of the lucky ones because I only lived about 5 or 6 blocks from the shop, so I could go home in 10 minutes and get 5 hours of sleep.
I can remember a lot of the linemen wouldn't even go home. The boiler room was right practically underneath the transformer shop and the storeroom, and you'd go down there and you'd see in those 6 hours that they'd be spread all over just trying to catch a nap.
It just seemed like it stretched on forever ahead of you, and you get pretty tired. But everybody seemed to work pretty well together. We didn't have, as far as I can remember, any big arguments or anything like that.
Customers were bringing food in to us because they knew that they were coming to our line department. It was a very busy time, but everybody pitched together, and that's what made the restoration of all the services a success.
On October 13th, the next day, the devastation was widespread. It might have been described as a war scene, but there were the rescue crews coming, such as the utility guys out there to try to get the power back. And of course, thousands of homes and businesses were without electricity.
Yeah, you look the situation over, and of course you try to avoid having to climb the pole, and because by this time you've climbed a lot of them, and so if you have to, you go up. Prime thing with PG is to get the customers back in. Everybody was proud of the company and wanted to keep the customers happy.
Well, we'd get out of the truck and take turns. One time I would work off the pole, and the next time he would work off the pole. We'd get our stuff out, look the job over, see what was needed. That's the first thing you do. And see how much damage was done and what had to be done.
You either grounded what you're going to work on, or you made sure before you touched anything it was dead, grounded it, and if you're in a good primary, and you had your rubber gloves on. Use your hot sticks.
The ideal thing was to get started in the morning, and then you just keep going until it couldn't go anymore. It was until you felt it was not safe, or you were just too dogged to do it.
Safety was always on your mind. Everybody looked for each other, and hollered if there was something wrong, or everybody. I don't remember the storm. I don't remember any fatalities, and I don't think there was many injuries either, as I recall.
We were listening to KGW on the radio. They were requesting fuel for their emergency generator. They only had enough to run a couple more hours, and then they were going to have to go off the air. So my dad always kept a couple gas cans of gasoline in the garage, and so we took these 2 Jeep cans of gas down there to the transmitter down at Vanport and helped keep them on the air for a while. And then they sent us a thank you letter. And then at Christmas time they sent us a big fruit basket with a thank you card in it too.
Well, it was approximately 2 weeks. When we got service restored to everything, there may have been a few places here and there that we hadn't, that were still out, but the majority of stuff was back on.
You know, it's like your first child. You don't forget. You know, that was quite an experience.
I just always knew that I admired the guys out there in the middle of the night, maybe the pouring rain, cold, and doing the best they can to get people back in power. The guys doing the work don't like to be out of power either, and they know what it's like.
The Columbus Day storm brought an awareness to PGE that, in my opinion, they had not thought about before, but like anyone, we never know what tomorrow brings. And so they are trying to prepare their employees, with employees have families, to get prepared in case there is another Columbus Day storm, or there could be an earthquake, or whatever, but be prepared, always be prepared.
It was amazing the amount of work that got done in such a short period of time. It really was. And you could feel proud that you were a part of that. You really could.
I had some pretty exciting times, but I think that was probably the most exciting.
Well, I guess you do it. I don't know how I did it either.
We're not heroes, we're just doing the job, and PG is a company that I worked for, and I'm glad I did. My dad always says, well, pick a company and stick with it, and that's what I did, and I picked a good one.